opposition has described it as bungled and a botch-up. So I asked National Party leader Simon Bridges what he would do differently.
Well, I've made no secret of my deep scepticism about fees free, about Shane Jones' funds, that ultimately could go into other infrastructure, but not sort of roundabouts to his house and mulch seedlings and so on. So I think there is literally billions of dollars there of waste that allow you to get back to the core priorities of a government that I would lead, which would be health, education, and infrastructure, and actually tax relief for those middle New Zealanders I've talked about, who at the moment, with rents, petrol and so on going up, are doing it tougher than they should be.
We'll get to that in a minute, but numbers do matter. It is a budget. So you're saying you take the money from fees free and you direct it into those areas you just listed.
Well, I'm the leader of the opposition, Lisa, so I'm not going to design a budget for you today. I would love the privilege to do that.
Don't you want people to know that you may be able to offer a credible alternative? So I'm asking you, on the back of your criticism, what you might deliver. So you would take that money from free fees and give it to the teachers? Is that what you're saying?
Here's what I'd deliver. I'd deliver certainty and confidence in business. So the economy from 4% wouldn't have slipped to 2% growth right now. I wouldn't have a $17 billion credit card debt for New Zealand families because they've loosened the fiscal responsibility. I wouldn't have all the flabby spending. I'd get it back to the core of health, education and infrastructure, and actually some tax relief to middle New Zealand.
What policies would you specifically fund? What would be your, if you don't agree with this budget, what would be your number one budget priority? What policy?
I'm the leader of the opposition. I tell you what, I could genuinely tell you, but I'm not going to, because I've got a year and a bit to an election, and I like to keep things interesting so that I can talk to you before the election about those things.
Potential voters just have to take your word on that, do they? You can't give us any details of an alternative today? Just one example. How about one example? How about just one?
Smaller class sizes, which this government promised, actually like cheaper GP visits and a variety of other things, and they haven't delivered on.
What do you think is the most commendable spend in this budget, the thing that you agree with and you would keep?
I think that the mental health spend and doing that is good. I certainly wouldn't disagree with it. I simply make the wider point I've raised over the overall health spend and what isn't there, like cancer drugs that people are going to Aussie and so on and so forth.
Again, when you list those things that you think should be funded and aren't, you have to find that money from somewhere else. So that's the other side of the coin.
Lisa,
where would you find it?
It's pretty simple right now with the big spray and walk away policies of this government. A couple of billion on Kiwi bills, $2.8 billion on fees free, $3 billion on Shane Jones. Billions that Winston's got squirreled away into a variety of things. If you even forget that, I'll say just on those first three, what have you got off the top of my head? You've got about $7 billion in spending. The problem this government
are the provinces and regions not worth investment, Mr. Bridges?
Well, let me make this first point. The problem this government has got when it talks about wellbeing and delivery is the economy is winding down. And that means they've got, $1 billion less in tax revenue coming in. Look, I wouldn't, in a national government, I think people know, be strong on that. That'd mean we'd have the ability to do more. You mentioned the regions. Look, don't make me laugh. What the regions of New Zealand want right now is good regulatory certainty. But they want to make sure there aren't stupid employment law changes, overseas investment changes, all of these things that mean it's pretty hard if you're a business in the regions to do any good. But they don't want beads and blankets from Shane Jones.
Hey, so just in terms of the pre-budget hoo-ha, what did you achieve with all of that?
Well, what we achieved was a situation where I was able to highlight the incompetence of the government, which is a much bigger problem with a weakening economy, with health and education not doing as well as they should, with law and order and crime going up significantly. And there's a second thing that I did. I was able to make the point early about this wellbeing budget, which is it may be many things, but in terms of the spin and the glossy pictures there, it's not a wellbeing budget. It's style over substance. And we saw that because the money, as we've seen today, was going to Winston Peters and his party for trains, for defence, not actually for cancer drugs.
Isn't that the reality of coalition government?
And the like.
Isn't that the reality of coalition government, Mr. Bridges? You make arrangements and you deliver things for those in the same way that National delivered charter schools to the ACT Party?
So let's run through this. Winston Peters and New Zealand First got billions. You know what the Green Party got? They got a $4 million working group on public transport. I mean, this is a funny, dysfunctional coalition that showed its incompetence over the last few days.
Just quickly before you go, are you still asking for Gabrielle McLouth's resignation?
Yeah, absolutely. I think his position is untenable.
That's just point scoring, isn't it? He's out of there in 4 weeks or roundabout. What purpose would it serve?
Sometimes principles and doing the right things matter. He's overseen a very dishonest Treasury operation in the last few days where they knew the truth, but they sat on a lie. And the truth would not have come out if I hadn't made clear I was having a press conference this morning, which resulted in significantly corrected statements at 5 a.m. this morning. Even then, they were begrudging. They were trying to be negative about things. Very, very dishonest.
So what about your principles in leveraging information that you shouldn't have had access to?
Oh, come on. I'm in opposition doing my duty. We serve some very useful purposes, highlighting the government's incompetence and also highlighting this government isn't leading a wellbeing government.
And that's National Party leader Simon Bridges.